with, this idea. Like Rob Whitaker, he does a lot of these evangelism seminars. Tim Wilkes, before he died, with Fishers of Men. I mean, there's a lot of guys that has done a lot of good things about evangelism. And what always people find is that anytime they do one of these seminars, wherever they're at or whatever the case may be, is that this is really easy. This is really easy. And so they do this seminar, and they do it just because they're trying to equip somebody, to give them this method, this way.
You're saying they realize that it's real easy?
The people that are taking it in.
Oh, yeah.
The people that are learning it. Because what happens is we think about it as another program. Mm-hmm. So we'll appoint a deacon over evangelism. Right, that's kind of like the guy that's over the bus.
Yeah, right.
like if something happens to the bus, then
he's in charge of it.
He's in charge of it, right?
But nobody else better touch the bus.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, evangelism, right? I mean, if evangelism is boiled down to a department, then what we rely on is somebody to tell me what to do and when to do it and how to do it and all this and that and the other. Just like the bus, the bus is broke. All right, well, somebody's got to go get the transmission fixed. Somebody's got to whatever, right? But no, I mean, it is the way that God chose to spread the gospel.
Yeah, and it's so if you're in leadership in the church, like if you got a deacon over evangelism, like you can keep doing what you're doing, but all you're doing is telling everybody else they don't have to do anything.
Right.
Or and he could be, or hopefully there would be a person in that position who would be trying to steer others.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with if this guy has good leadership qualities, good motivational skills, good, all those things are what, when you think about the guy that's your evangelism leader, he should be the guy that should be able to help you with, so you got, so you think, let's talk about evangelism for a minute. Let's just break it down a little bit, because sometimes we think about it's this, toting my Bible to go see somebody, right? Well, I mean, you think about this, there are 1, 2, 3 people that my family is working on right now that was brought to us by somebody else, right?
That's evangelism.
That's evangelism.
On the other people, yeah.
On the other people, right? And so, if you got a guy that's the evangelism guy, maybe he's a good facilitator of like, okay, listen, I got this guy that I work with, and I really need some, is there any way we can get this guy together with this other guy that's got this really good personality, or he's good at setting up Bible studies, or so whatever.
Some people call that like a connections person, or I don't know what you call it, but it's the dude, right? I just need the dude, get me the dude, right? The dude that does what? Well, I don't know. You have to. There has to be a need before there's a dude, right? Yeah. And so, so essentially, evangelism is the absolute core fundamental principle of the church. Last night we were talking about in our class, great churches have great homes, and we're talking about some mistakes to avoid. And one of the challenges that we have faced for many generations now is that the reason why they get so upset when we start talking about Jesus is because they've been real comfortable with Jesus as long as we kept him in the building. Yeah, let me keep Jesus where I want him.
Yeah, so the world is perfectly fine with us keeping Jesus in the church building. But when we bring him outside the building, that's when they get real uncomfortable. But you see, that's what God wanted us to do. He could have chose a million different ways to get the gospel out, but he just chose us.
That's right. And that's what's crazy. And I think you were one of the ones that really brought that to light to me. Just not that I didn't know that it wasn't my responsibility, but some of my favorite conversations with you has been like in your garage and in Virginia and just working on something. And but some of your best sermons were there. And at least the most important was to me, but just thinking about why in the world did God put the gospel on the backs of men, I'll never know it. But that's the neat thing is Jesus came to be not only the Son of God, but the Son of Man, and he could relate with everyone. And so he can relate with our weaknesses, but also there's a God, the all powerful, infinite, everlasting, omnipresent God said, I'm gonna let you do this. And it just baffles me.
What I think about is that, so oftentimes somebody, my boss, I had this little short guy that was my boss, and I loved Dex. He was so awesome, and he would come to me, and he always called me Big Mans. I don't know why I was plural. Big Mans. He called me plural Big Mans. Maybe I'm so fat like it's plural now, right? But Dex would come to me, and he would say, "Listen, I need you to do something for me," and whenever he said that, I knew it was going to be something really kind of weird, unique thing that had to be done. And I knew it was always going to be a challenge when he said that, and I never knew what it was going to be. I'm hanging off a ladder, beating on something for the rest of the day to fix something
in the freezing cold,
or am I making something from scratch? What does that mean? But he would come to me because he'd have confidence and I can do whatever it was, and I wouldn't even really know what it was. And so God, long before he made you and I mean, long before he did it, the plan was to send Jesus. Mm-hmm. I mean, the plan was to send Jesus. I mean, that's Ephesians 1, right? Predestined us for adoption. Right. Before the foundation of the world, all these things. Hebrews 1:1, in many ways, in many manners, God spoke to our fathers, but through the prophets, but in these last days.
Spoken to us by his son.
He's spoken to us by his son. And his son, the last thing his son said was, listen. You go into the world, and I got this really important thing for you to do. You go into the world and you preach the gospel.
That's right. And so who he told that to were pretty much, 11 guys. Later, they're going to add Matthias to it, but he's telling that to just everyday people and everyday guys, commercial fishermen, tax collectors, a zealot. There's just everyday people, and they took the gospel and changed the world, not because of the messenger, but because of the message.
That's right. And that's what that's the awesome part of the gospel, is that when Jesus moved the stone, he gave us a story to move the world.
Amen.
And so,
yeah, good one.
Don't we have one?
Maybe. Yeah.
It kind of loses itself when you wait.
Right.
But the awesome thing is that it's Bob. I just wish so much that I could get every Christian in the world in some kind of way and just help them understand that I promise you can be successful at this. I promise you can be successful at this. And it's when everybody reads the Muscle and the Shovel book, for example, mm-hmm. they don't really think about Michael. They all think about Randall. The guy that was telling
Michael,
the whole little shooting match there, right? Leading him to Jesus. And you know why? It's because everybody wants to be like him. Every single person can be like him.
That's right, you can. And some people go, well, I'm just not qualified to do that. And I just look at the scriptures that talk about the fact that God didn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
Wow, that's a good one.
And so, and that's when you truly think about it, like when you become a Christian, God is going to use your unique abilities and your talents and your personality to reach somebody that somebody else can't.
And that's exactly what he requires of you, is what you got.
Yeah.
That's what he requires of you, is what you got.
That's right. When I look at Romans chapter 8, he says, what shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? Who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us all? How shall he not with him also freely give us all things? So he's going to give us these things, and who shall bring a charge against God's elect? It's God who justifies, and not somebody else. But in the verses before that, verse 28 of Romans 8, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And it's not saying that everything's going to work together for good for you today. You might have a bad day today and go, well, things didn't work together good for me today. But it's for those who are called according to his purpose and not according to our own purpose. And that's why, James said, hey, when you pray and they don't get answered, it's because you're praying amiss. You're asking these things that are going to be for your own benefit. And so many times that's the way that I feel like that too many Christians are living their lives. It's for us, and that's our human nature, is to want to live for me. We're all guilty of it at times. And he says, look, when you're called according to his purpose, these things are going to work together because God's purpose is so that all men might be saved.
Mm-hmm.
And when we live our lives in that way, this says, okay, I'm just going to invest in this, and I'm expecting nothing in return.
That's right.
And we're just going to see where the Lord takes it.
And you know, the hard part with it is the steadfastness, right? Mm-hmm. Because you think about,
that's what I struggle with at times.
Well, you think about your successes and versus your, you know. So here's something that I've learned. Okay, I have learned, and for a long time I used to keep record of this, that over 90% of the people that I ask, if you would like to study the Bible with me, however that question is asked to them, right, setting up a Bible study, over 90% of the people, you know what they always say?
Yes.
Yes. It would have been real bad if it would have been no.
Yeah, right.
Yes, they say yes. And now,
that's awesome.
But you think about this. Do I baptize 90% of them?
No.
No. And out of the ones that we baptize, how many of them remain faithful? That's a whole nother, you know, you keep necking it down and you're necking it down. But I'm going to tell you right now, Bob, I have got some of the most awesome victory stories that you could ever imagine with people that I've converted.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm telling you, you live for them stories.
That's right.
You live for them because, you know, there are people right now that I'm telling you that I'm thinking about them. I can see their faces, and I can see him, and then I can see his wife, and then I can see his kids, and then I can see his family, you know, his cousins, then I can see the guys that he's working with, that they're actively seeking to teach them what God would have them to do to go to heaven. Mm-hmm. And you know what you really have is a true conversion.
A conversion, that's right.
And I remember I was working on this one guy's truck one time, and he had broke a motor mount on it. And I'm up in the wheel well of this thing, and I don't fit in the wheel well about anything, right? And I'm welding this motor mount on it. It's just rusted off, and I'm welding a new motor mount back on the side of the frame for him.
It's got to be like a big old D8.
Yeah, cat. You're right, exactly. You know,
fit up in the wheel well.
Yes, but it wasn't. It was about a 95 model F-150. So I'm in there with a shoehorn, right? And it's grease everywhere. It keeps catching on fire, you know, because it's just grease and oil and everything. And so I'm sitting there with
you're welding?
Yeah, I'm welding a motor mount back on it. Or it's either welding one or maybe at this point cutting the old one off with the torch. I can't remember what I was doing. But anyways, I had to weld one back on. Yeah. And so I remember him and I are sitting there underneath this thing, and I'm welding this thing back on for him, and I'm thinking, like, well, this would be a good time, you know, to have that spiritual checkup, right? You know, how things are going for you. And, you know, so I asked him, I said, how's things are going for, you know, how's things, you know, in your life since you became a Christian? And I remember that we were squatting down. Like I said, I'm bowed up inside this fender well. Mm-hmm. He lays a wrench down and he stands up, and I kind of pull out of this thing and I stand up, and we're standing eye to eye, and he looks me square in the eyes and he said, "You'll never imagine how much it's changed my life." Mm. And I remember thinking right then, because, like, you know, he lays it down, I'm thinking, all right, what's he get ready to do, right? Yeah. But he says, "You can't imagine how much it's changed my life." And I remember thinking, got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And so, you know, you for every story like that I have, I've got 10 failures.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And I don't mean that I failed. I just mean that it just shows me that my Lord was right.
Yeah, and I remember being all nervous about trying to teach people the gospel, and of course the first person I tried to teach the gospel, I failed. I was 16, and then I remember going and talking to just beginning to talk to teenagers and telling them about the Bible. And of course, you know, you don't want to steer anybody wrong, but
you're scared to death, right?
Yeah, I was scared to death, but at the same time, you know, teens were, you know, they were real receptive of hearing about Jesus. And that's really what it boils down to, is telling them about Jesus and how to contact the blood.
Every Christian that becomes a Christian can tell somebody how they did it.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is I ask people, like, what did the Lord do for you? And they're like, and And it's like, what did he bring you from? You know, where are you at today? What did Jesus do for you? And every Christian should be able to say that. And if you can't, I just dare to say that, do you really understand what he really did for you? And is salvation really there? Are you truly living by faith? And that's the thing is, so when Jesus, we make this real hard, and he put it to us real simple in Matthew chapter 10, and he says in Matthew 10, he's talking about, hey, whoever receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. That's in verse 40. But you get down to verse 42 of Matthew 10, and he says, and whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple, assuredly I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward.
You know what that is? That's the heart of evangelism.
Mm-hmm.
Everything done, everything that your motivation behind it is evangelism, is then in turn evangelism. Why do you think that Paul wants to collect all this money for the poor saints at Jerusalem?
Yeah, so to spread the gospel.
Yeah, it wasn't about, let's separate out the poor saints at Jerusalem. But no. We got an opportunity. You remember he says there's a great door's been opened to me in Ephesus. There's just all these. So what I really want people to understand is that you can do it. You're going to make mistakes. I can't tell you the mistakes that I've made. I just remember that I set goals in my life. That what I did was, when I really buckled down, I got back from my first mission trip, and I remember calling my wife in El Salvador in this little hotel thing, and I'm telling her, like, we're going to make some changes when we get home. And she asked me, like, what do you mean? And I remember telling her, I don't really know. I just know we got to make some changes. And so I'm thinking, like, I'm not going to come down here and spend a week.
She's wondering, like,
are you coming home?
What's he mean?
Yeah. Did you bring one back with you?
Yeah.
But I'm just so thankful that I got a wife that, that's willing to be led and wants to grow and wants to do the right thing. And because I said, I'm just going to ask 100 people to study the Bible with me.
Yeah.
I just set a goal. I'm going to ask 100 people to study the Bible with me this year. And so that's what I started doing. I just started asking people. I mean, first thing I did was went over to my neighbor's house that I'd never met before. I hadn't lived there long. I was like, I'm gonna just go over here, bang on the door. And I remember, like, trying my best to figure out how I can ask him. And there's even that awkward pause. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'm not leaving to ask this guy. And he's sitting there looking at me like, what? And finally I come out with, and he's like, oh, well, yeah, maybe sometime. I remember thinking,
maybe sometime down the road.
Yeah, right. Well, it never happened.
Yeah.
Right. But it won't long, and I started asking to everybody that I could come across.
Yeah, and sometimes, that can even be intimidating for people. And then it's like, well, what happens when somebody says yes?
Yeah, well, I just didn't know, Bob. Mm-hmm. Only thing I did was I just said, I am going to do this.
Yeah, that's right.
By and large, there was nobody really around. Like we say things like, and I hear it said, and I know it's with good intentions and really honest motive behind it. They'll say, like, when we start talking about evangelism, don't forget the people that you work with. Don't forget the people at the bank that you see all the time, or the grocery store, or whatever. And I've heard people say that forever, those type of things. Mm-hmm. But I had never seen anybody convert one of those people.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so, like, I just remember thinking, like, okay, there's a disconnect, some kind of way, some kind of where. And so I said, I'm just going to start doing that.
Yeah.
I'm going to start asking those people. And I did. And I remember the first guy that I baptized after I made this. Now, I had some studies before with some folks, and, we had baptized a couple people, but it wasn't the focus of my life, right? And the first guy that I did, his car was broke down on the side of the road. So I stopped and pulled over, helped him fix his car, and his alternator had went out. Well, I have my jump box with me, and it had just enough charge where I could hook my jump box to it, and he could drive his car home with the hood duct taped down and my jump box underneath it, running the car. And I set up a study with him, and I remember us studying on my back porch at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, because we were both working second shift, and he worked some other place in town. And it was about 1:30 one morning I baptized him. Mm-hmm. And I remember he was one of the 100, but he won't but about number 12.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the percentages are of it, but I know this, that I thought I was going to run out of year before I run out of 100. Really what happened was I run out of season before I run out of 100.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't long when and I try to caution people with this, because you've heard me say this before, but if we forget that the world is lost, we're real close to rejoining them.
That's right.
Because God, that's why he says, don't say that the fields are, that the harvest is coming, that we'll have time, or let's kick the can down the road. He says, look up your eyes and see that the fields are white to harvest. What he expects you to do then is just figure out how to do it.
Yeah. You know what I'm in need of right now?
What, coffee?
No. Lithium grease. So I was
I got some.
Yeah, so I'm trying to replace this this gear and sprocket on my garage door opener, and it was what happened was the plastic. In fact, when I first saw it, I was like, I wonder if Chris can 3D print one of these things, but it's like $23, and I get the whole new set and 3 bolts. You take it out and put it back in. I got to take the chain off, anyways. But it didn't come with a kit. Some of these things come with a kit with a little tube of
little pack
of lithium grease,
like a ketchup pack type.
Yeah, and so of course it's like you can't use regular grease or whatever, and because it would attract dust or whatever. And I'm learning some of them things, but so I was like, well, okay, I got to go to the store. But I thought, you know what? I wonder which one of my neighbors has got some lithium grease. And I said, and I had one in mind. So my wife's been so good about, over the last couple of years, just whether it's Christmas time or whenever, just kind of baking goods and taking to our neighbors. And she fattened me up, and she's going to try to fatten them up. But it's a way to, she's doing it with intentions of evangelism to open that door. And so I've got a neighbor that's, he's wild about cars, and so I thought, he might have some, and I've been looking for an opportunity to so I thought, well, you know what, I'm gonna see if I can depend on him for something, and then maybe one day he can depend on me for something. So I went to him, he's like, hey, let's go check or whatever, and he's a retired military guy, and so I'm over there, and of course, what do you think we talked about?
Lithium grease?
We talked about lithium grease and cars and everything, but, eventually just a couple seeds got planted about Jesus, and no big deal, I didn't say, hey, can we have a Bible study or whatever, but just starting that relationship, and that's the goal I want him to go to heaven. I don't want grease from him.
That's right. And so what happens is people look at the way that other people are doing it. Mm-hmm. And they say, I'm just not that kind of person.
That's okay.
That's right. Yeah. You're not.
Right.
I was saying something, I think it was last week, like my Jones hat that Brian give us, mm-hmm. I can get everything, but the last button is all I can get buttoned on it because my head's so fat. You know why? Because those things are supposed to be one size fits all.
It fits most.
It fits most, right? There may be some things that work for most, but that hat don't work for all, okay? I got one button, and it just kind of pivots on that one button now, right? I don't have enough two. That, if I put two on it, it makes my head hurt. So I have to put the one on, and then it wiggles together, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about 3D printing me an extender for my hat, right?
An extender.
And
you'll be able to find those on our website.
Yeah, that's exactly the unscripted podcast. But no, seriously, what happens is people look at it and they think like, well, look at what that guy's doing. There's no way I can do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm so happy with them. I'm going to send money their way, and money, the gospel needs to be spread. And
right.
It takes cash at times.
Yeah, but I promise you, just as much as Courtney making food for the neighbors. Jessica's going to the park and pedal tonight with a lady who, I don't want to mention her name, but one of the people that we've been studying with.
That's right, yeah.
And their intentions,
I know what your wife's intentions are.
Yeah, their intentions are is just to continue to forge that relationship together.
That's right.
And so that when we sit back down with her and her husband again this week and study the Bible, their relationship is further cemented
There's
together.
another connection.
There's a stronger connection, right? And so, it's like, you think about this stuff that we're, on Thursday nights, we're doing this thing with the kids, right? Well, the interesting thing about that is tomorrow, on Thursday nights, we got this class that we're doing with the kids. We're teaching them a lot of vocational trades, and they're learning a lot of cool stuff, and it's really fun. I'm
learning a lot.
They're having a blast with it.
I'm having a blast.
And I am too, because, now we've got people from the college that are coming over here working with us. We've got some of the public schools that are actually sending us kids over to a church, right? I got to go in the morning to Ellisville to the community college up there, because you can call it what you want. Providence would have me in the machine shop teacher at Ellisville Community College. I'm going up there at 9 o'clock in the morning for their program. But do you think I love making stuff. I do.
Yeah.
I love making stuff. But more than importantly, I want to make disciples.
You want them to go to heaven.
Exactly right. I want them to go to heaven.
And that's what Jesus tells us. He's like, look, that's what he told them. You go and you make disciples, and you baptize them, and it's just the bottom line, and that's what we're supposed to be doing, and that's what every Christian should be doing, and not just be putting it on the backs of the preacher or the deacon over evangelism. That it's up to me and it's up to you, and both of us, we didn't go to some school of preaching. It was
Hard knocks.
Yeah, that's right, and we're just a couple of everyday guys, and if we can do it, we know that you can do it, and it was a neat thing, and I think I've told this story on the podcast before. But our we had a neighbor one time who'd come out of the denomination world. But I asked her, I said, well, what made you decide to become a Christian? And she said, you really want to know? I said, yeah. She said, chocolate upside down cake. And I was like, what? And these ladies had targeted her, and she moved in, and a member of the church came over and knocked on her door, and when she knocked on the door, she said, here's a chocolate upside down cake. But she said, me and some other ladies have a Bible study, and we'd love for you to come be a part of it. Well, they didn't have no Bible study. They was just her and some other ladies. They had this whole thing planned to where they were going to teach her the gospel. And so they didn't have a regular Bible study, but that was kind of their plan, was whenever you get new neighbors or you get a new opportunity, we'll just all come. And whatever day that it is during the week, as many of us as can come will come.
Yeah, and so the awesome part about it is that chocolate cakes and greasy fingers and blisters, all those things get people to heaven.
That's right.
And so
it's your cup of cold water.
It's your cup of cold water. Exactly right. And so, I'm gonna sit down with these kids at the community college, and I get to work with them and hang out with them, and they tell me their stories about things, and listen, I was 19. Every one of them stories they heard, I just tell you this, they're not going to tell me nothing that's going to surprise me,
right,
for a lot of reasons. And so, what I want them to do, what we're trying to do, and what we're pray that we can be successful with, is that we can get them to heaven. And so, that's going to come through panning for gold. It's going to come through you got to sift through a lot of rocks and a lot of dirt to get that gold. But when you find it, it's worth it.
That's right. I had a guy call me this week, Monday night. He was only an acquaintance that I'd had back with the sheriff's office. And he was a guy who would come around. He was old, retired Vietnam vet. And anyways, it's neat just how that God has continued to make these connections. And but I mean, he was just kind of an acquaintance for me, and he would sell things to our drug unit to help us out and things. And if you send somebody in to undercover to make a buy, he was a kind of guy who could put a camera in a key fob, or he could put a camera in a little handheld thing, or whatever it might be. And so, you know, a phone.
Spy stuff.
Yeah, spy stuff. So he would sell the spy stuff that was like now
James Bond stuff.
Yeah, so it was James Bond stuff then. Now you can get the stuff on Amazon for cheap, you know.
Right,
so, but that's how he made his living. Yeah, that's how he made his living. And so he was good at it, but he was just kind of an acquaintance, and he was a private investigator, and I just kind of.
Here in Hattiesburg? I mean,
no, up in
Tennessee?
In Tennessee. And so, like, I literally haven't talked to the guy in a couple of years, but then, like, one day, this has been like 2 years ago, like his name popped up on my phone, and I'd helped him with some surveillance and when he was doing some private investigation stuff, but his name popped up on my phone. I thought, what? And then he called me, and he's like, well, I didn't mean to call you, but we just got to chatting for just a minute, and he'd lost his son, and I prayed with him and different stuff like that. Well, he called me up the other night, and I thought he was calling the wrong number because he's did that in the last 6 months. Called the wrong Robert, and so I screened the first one. I was like, you know, I don't think he's trying to call me. Well, he called back the second time. I was like, well, I'm gonna answer it. Answered it up, and he's like, man, I've just always thought a lot of you, and I get scared when I hear those. You don't know if somebody's fixing to check out or what.
Right.
And he just said, I don't know what it is, but I got to get right with the Lord. And this man's on hospice. And so, you know, we began talking and studying, and we're going to continue to study. And it's you just never know, but that was a seed that was planted, you know, 10 years ago that is now coming about to fruition. And so you never know what you might be doing. So the things that you do today and the way that you live your life, just live it so that one day you can teach that person the gospel.
Plant those seeds.
Plant those seeds.
Right.
This is the Unscripted Podcast.